I'm very proud to be a member of the logistics profession. I've been so for 32 years. I'm a native as well. John's local. I grew up in Cheetham Hill. I was born, if we're dropping names, Harper Hay. Okay, if you're a local, then Harper Hay is sort of up there, isn't it? It's like the Wilmslow of North Manchester. Blakely, that's where my nana lived. So I'm local and born and bred in Manchester, but I've moved around the country with the logistics profession, and I started in the business in the industry as a driver. And like many of you, you work from solid foundations, you work hard, you throw yourself into things, etc., and it's amazing what can come out the other side. So I think things now are a bit more structured and a bit more professional, but I think the opportunities are massive for young people coming into the profession. So I'd support anybody who wanted to do it. What I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about Clipper, who we are, where we came from. I'd like to talk about some cultural shifts, not quite mega trends, just trends. And I'd also like to talk about some further evolution, things that are happening now, but also things that I think might come along relatively soon. We talk to lots of clients, so we know what they've got in their ideas, and we'd like to share some of those ideas with you. So Clipper Logistics started just under 30 years ago. The current exec chairman, for whom there was a 2-page spread in the Times Rich list a couple of weeks ago, started with a couple of mates and a van in Leeds. And he's ex-miner, still close to his roots, but the business now is close on £500 million turnover. So has grown and has grown massively with the onset of e-com and logistics. So about 75% of what we do is fashion, and the other 25% is GM. We don't do aggregates, we don't move fuel around. We stay within a specific niche, but clearly the marketplace has exploded behind us, so that's been instrumental to our fortunes. In terms of scale, we're currently at 47 sites, 10 million square feet. As I sat there, I worked out, so this shed here, we've got the equivalent of about 625 of these across UK, mostly Germany and Poland as well. So we've got 2 sites in Poland that serve Central Europe. The vast majority of what we do is shared user. We've only got 2 locations who are soulless locations, one for Superdry and one for Zara. The rest of it, we tend to have an anchor client or 2 in a particular location, and then we trade space over and above that. So we'll look to fill space, we'll look to create value-added services for customers. Speaking of which, we've totted them up. There are about 75 things we do for customers, large and small, and returns is a big part of that, so we'll get on to that. In terms of the key services we offer, down the left-hand side of the screen, e-fulfillment, returns management. So when John Manelli was here earlier talking about Magna Park and how that works, that's a beautiful, disciplined environment, but we receive everything into our site in Northampton. We pre-retail everything to make it automation ready. So all of the totes that you saw, all of the hanging garments that you saw, the overbagging, etc., we do up the road in Northampton, and that's something that we've done for a number of years now, and we've got a 10-year contract to do that with John Lewis. And then the other ugly bit of that sort of equation is returns, because returns is one of the most ill-disciplined suppliers you will ever meet, because it's made up of tens of millions. Just to put some scale on it, we're just over 75 million returns a year at the moment, and that looks like it's going to top 100 million by the end of next year. Our bigger customers in that arena would be John Lewis themselves and ASOS. They may make up probably about 60% of that total, just from 2 clients. We do multi-channel solutions, we do retail. On the video for John Lewis, you saw click and collect orders being picked up in stores. We run that network as well. So we've got 2 large transport networks, totaling over 500 trucks that run all over the country every day. And we also do high value operations, and we run consolidation centres for different places like Regent Street, Newcastle University, Meadowhall Shopping Centre. So going back to that sort of panoramic view of 75 different services, we do that for over 300 customers. These are just some thumbnails of some of the names that you would recognise across that particular space. So hopefully, for people who didn't know or thought they knew about Clipper, there's a bit more colour on the equation there. I'll be around afterwards. If anybody wants to talk about anything, you've got any further questions, I'll invite questions at the end, and I'll do my best with those. But if anybody wants to talk one-to-one, then please help yourself. In terms of the e-com market, I've talked about the fact that we've grown massively with that. Lots of statistics will tell you e-commerce in Europe is growing, and hence why we bought a couple of companies out in Germany and then expanded into Poland, etc. We've also bought a couple of technology businesses as well. So in addition to all the fashion stuff we do, part of our 25% of non-fashion is TVs, white goods, electronics. So we do Samsung, we do Nintendo, we refurb TVs. So we'll take it from one brand, we'll take the brand off, and then we'll rebrand it as something else, and we'll sell that through disposition routes, grey markets, etc. So you can imagine, in terms of reverse logistics, we've got quite an array of things that we do on the back of the explosion in e-com. More information about e-com soaring. I'll share this information with Richard so he can share it with you, rather than take too much time over each of the different elements. But one of the things to call out is customers are evolving. You've seen the use of smartphones. Their level of tolerance, I think, now is born in seconds. I think if something doesn't load, sometimes in milliseconds, but certainly in seconds, even we, who are the more tolerant generation, just lose patience with things. So people's tolerance for anything that is substandard in terms of service, immediacy, pace, they just won't wear it. And that extends into returns especially, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Returns are costing retailers about 60 billion a year. So this is, I came to talk about this particular subject. This is an enormous, both opportunity, but it's an enormous problem. And there's a big trade-off, really, a big dichotomy between a frictionless transaction with a customer, make it easy for a customer to return items, etc., but also the fact that then the psychology is lost. Once they've had the refund, then the psychology isn't there, so their behaviour can become quite slow and quite costly as a consequence of all of that. One thing I want to put to pull on that is the section at the bottom. 69% of retailers are not deploying any technology solutions to process returns. So even though customers are asking for it faster, becoming less tolerant about it, the technological side is lagging behind. And when I talked earlier about the fact that it's a difficult inbound channel, that makes it all the more difficult, because the ability to, at small scale, medium scale, to be able to deploy any particular technology over and above a system and a handheld is extremely difficult, and difficult to justify ROI. So we created a product called Boomerang. So Boomerang is our returns management solution. It's built in JDA, and essentially is a configurable rules engine that allows us to sit down with a customer and look at what their customer proposition is, look at the way in which their products need to be disposed of, or put back to stock, or graded, or whatever. So we worked on those. And some of the key challenges that come with that are the immediacy of fashion cycles. But also, more and more retailers have a KPI which is full price sales. So anything that marks down sales or marks down the price of a product is a loss to that particular business. So we talk to retailers and say, actually, we want to get above 80% full price sales before they start to go into sale, to markdown, to grey routes, etc. There's also a huge challenge in getting inventory back to that full priced availability. So a consumer getting a refund quickly is fantastic. The retailers are looking to engage with them and look at their lifetime value, but that product can sit in somebody's boot of the car, in their bag, on the desk at work, etc., because the refund has already been granted. But the psychology is that they've sort of lost a transaction, they're onto something else. So trying to incentivize and partner with customers to get those items back into the supply chain is really important. We talked about the dichotomy of the fact that that can be done faster, but the behaviour is a lot slower. And then retailers are seeking any competitive advantage. So that tends to be the driver of innovation. Credit at first touch point is about a competitive advantage. Amazon were probably one of the leaders in terms of scale, although other people did it before them. And what they're wrestling with is they're taking short-term hits to profitability. And generally, any returned item tends to be loss-making, but because of the cultural shift whereby you have to make returns frictionless for customers, then that gives you that short-term stab in the guts over profitability. But what the trade-off is, they'll keep coming back for more and more each time. And the final thing, and it's not an exhaustive list, returns is now the biggest inbound supplier for virtually every retail supply chain. If you work on the basis that returns rates will typically sit anything between 20 and 50%, then returns is the biggest inbound supplier and is the most ill-disciplined. So trying to corral that particular equation is a difficult one. And our largest operation, we run 1,000 people processing returns across a working week, 24/7, to try and wrestle with the scale of what's there. We also find that returns is relatively peaky, and what used to be a returns peak post-Christmas, a typical one, has now become a series of peaks post-sale. So Black Friday was a sort of a peak, X plus 10 days you'd see a peak. Now, because Black Friday has now become Black 4 weeks or whatever people are then moving towards, means that we've got peakiness challenges in terms of processing speed, returning it back to stock, but also finding people during those periods. And we also find, and there's information from KPMG, that if somebody returns it quickly, goes back to a store, hands it back, it can be back in stock in less than 2 days. If, however, somebody gets a refund and then takes their time, eventually goes to a convenience store, drops it in their supply chain, takes 2 days to get back, isn't processed quickly enough, then that's 10 days. And we've calculated the fact that not only is that a huge working capital hit to a business, because you've got stock invested and it's sitting out in the ether, but also it is there is the risk that when you get to about probably the 15th of December, that anything that doesn't get put back into stock at that point will be into markdown post-Christmas. So you've got the double hit of cash flow impact that comes because of slow returns processes. So a big part of our pressure is 24-hour SLAs on returns. So the minute it arrives back with us, there's an expectation we'll have it back in a decent shape to do that. And that's difficult because the technological solutions are not that advanced. And that's a bit of a cry for help, I think, in terms of, if there are providers out there who think, well, actually, there's small 1%, 2%, and 3% increments that we can make to bits of it, then we'd love to hear about it. We tend to try and push a lot down the store route, so we tend to try and push that through the click and collect and through the reverse route, because that's just the faster way to get returns back, and we can take control of it quicker, and often you can get store colleagues to help you in that particular environment. The other thing that we're doing is we're partnering with Leeds University. So the Leeds Institute of Data Analytics are going to help us create an insight tool. At the moment, quite a lot of you know about IMRG, about Metapack data. You can log onto a portal. You can find out a lot about what's going on in outbound. You can look at parts of the country and say, yeah, I know the delivery by carrier for that particular segment of the country. There are no insight tools on returns. A white t-shirt returned by a lady aged 34 in Hartlepool is a complete mystery to anybody as to its predictability, its likelihood, etc. So as a consequence, retailers overstock because they don't have a known relationship with which types of products they can expect to return. Then of that, which 90% of it will be grade A and could be back in stock really quickly. So in that sort of fog, we want to make some educated, or we're going to build some educated models that then start to analyse that behaviour so that we can then plug into a retailer and say, well, if you sell these things, the likelihood of return looks like this. So that's a project where we've hired a master's graduate to do that very thing, just to sit there and sweat that particular data and start to create the insights. In terms of other things that are coming down the pipe, paperless returns are already here. They're not really paperless, but it's a funky way of describing them. But essentially, you can walk in with a QR code and you can create a label in store at convenience stores to get your item back and through into stock. You can also log on to a portal. More and more retailers are abandoning paper, so they're abandoning inserts and moving towards a portal. And the portal can keep it up to date, relevant, give you offers. It can try and drive your behaviour, create partnership and loyalty schemes, etc. Where a piece of paper that's been printed 3 months before in the sort of classical way just won't do that. We talked about predictive analytics, but also you will see more in-flight services for returns. So you've got in-flight on the way out at the moment where you can log on to an app for delivery and you can divert it to a convenience store. You can set a preference for where you'd like it leaving if you're not going to be in for a home delivery. Returns will offer the same sort of thing in that where you've got trusted customers and they're a known quantity, they behave a certain way, then those returns will often be diverted to a store rather than go to to returns processing centres like the ones that we run. So you can see that we know that's coming down the pipe, and what that will mean is faster to stock. It'll go to a store. The store colleague can check it and then make it available and scan it as available to a client having checked that it is in grade A quality. RFID tags are coming down in cost, but also the technology is becoming more reusable. Sometimes with retailers we can't quite go where we'd like to because of the severity of washing cycles. RFID tags just won't stay, so they tend to stick on swing tickets, etc. But the technology we anticipate happening means that not only can you RFID tag an item and get all the stock accuracy and all the other benefits, but also you can see it go through its cycle to wear and then back out, or cycle to try on and then back again, plot those timings. And I'm not saying it's really about a fraud issue, it's just more about the certainty of what's happening on a given product. More customers will be rewarded for collaborative returns, which means tell us what the real reason is, rather than the first item on the drop down, and get it back to us quickly. And we'll reward you with points, discounts, etc. Because if you go back to my point about the speed at which returns can flow through or not, that's a way of trying to engage and even gamify with the customer to get those back. We'd like to see more automation. We've tried lots of things. At 75 million returns you would do, wouldn't you? So auto folding would be a huge boon to us. We've seen small sort of fragments of solutions there, but they tend to be the sort of things that you might have in a sort of a dry cleaners, but don't offer up the scale and not robust enough to be able to survive what we would do to them. In terms of bagging and RFID tags, we're just about to deploy a big automation project which will combine the two. That will have robot arms that essentially carry an RFID tag on a folded garment, take it to an auto bagger, remove the RFID tag so that the customer doesn't know, and we've got the recycling element, but the customer doesn't know it's a returned item. It looks like it's original bagged. It's labelled as you would expect a normal item, but actually what we've done is automate a lot of those processes. And then the final bit that we see a lot of, and we're doing work, we've got robots, goods demand robots working on this, is in these fast fashion cycles, returns tend to be some of the most popular items in that fashion cycle. So instead of taking them away, put them away deep back with the rest of their SKU range, we'll create new picking locations and we'll pick from returns straight away. So we've already done an R&D project on a robotic trial with that, which has gone brilliantly. Efficiency is increased by either 100 to 400% in terms of both put away, consolidation and pick. So we're amazed at those. And what we are going to do is roll that out, but also to make that multi-user. Because we've got multi-user sheds, why wouldn't we make them multi-user bays of shelving? So those are the things that you can see and certainly take part in with our business. So just to summarise, returns, as you already knew, are now part of the retail logistics landscape. AI, in terms of understanding the data, the big data that sits behind them, and robotic processes are going to grow in significance. There's lots of opportunities for automation and mechanisation, even if it's small fragments. And there are significant business cases driven by the need to preserve working capital. And my final point I've just mentioned, shared user returns will also create the critical mass to get the ROI up. And some of the things that some of the suppliers in the room will face a challenge with is customers in a fragmented way won't be able to justify the ROI. Whereas if you make them a shared user environment, then that's much more tolerable. Okay, any questions? Thank you very much.